Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with episode number 77 of the Yakking Show. We talk about life, business, and more, and we like to bring you tips and ideas for the changing world we are finding ourselves in these days, and it's certainly changing from day to day. As always, we have interesting guests to entertain you, enlighten you, and sometimes to educate you. And I think today's guest is going to do all three and be strong on the entertainment side as well. But it's not my job to introduce guests. It's my job to say to you, if you like our show, please subscribe, and then you'll definitely not miss the next episode of the show. Enough from me, and I'm going to welcome my co-host, Kathleen. Hello, Kathleen. Good to see you back again.
Good to see you, Peter, as always. And thank you all so very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate you, and we love reading your comments. So do please keep them coming. And if anyone out there is interested in becoming a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today. Her name, and she's coming from Dublin, Ireland. Oh, I love Ireland. But welcome, Orla O'Sullivan. How are you, Orla?
I am very good, thank you. And I'm delighted to be together this evening, to eat together.
Oh, well, the honor is ours. And Orla, can you please tell our audience a little bit about your background? But you are a mindfulness trainer and consultant. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your background and explain what mindfulness is.
Okay. So my background, so it's quite varied. It's largely in education and in developing systems to help teams flourish. So whether that's a family, whether it's a department, whether it's a company. So I work on kind of the vision of where we want to go and then how we pool our wisdom and our experience together in order to help us get there. And so I've worked in a variety of organizations, for human rights organizations, charities, disruptive fintech startups. I worked with JP Morgan on Wall Street. I curated a museum of manuscripts and early printed books. And I lectured in English literature. So quite a wide variety of roles. And the strand that's always come through it, so I've been practicing mindfulness in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh for over 20 years, maybe 22, 23 years. And mindfulness is an energy that we generate in this moment of our life. So we spend a lot of our lives just hooked, like just on autopilot, planning the next thing that we're going to do. So if we take like 20 seconds together now, and you might just explore, where is your right foot right now? So just go and explore, find where your right foot is. And what data are you receiving from it? So what your foot is being touched by, maybe the sense of pressure of shoe or its weight against the floor. If you scanned it with an imaginary thermal scanner, can you find the coziest part of your right foot? And then you can release your attention. So that's micro mindfulness. It's just mindfulness of your right foot. Mm-hmm. And most of our lives, we are not in this moment, not with our body. We're pulled. So we're pulled constantly by the past. We replay the past. We are drawn into 10 million different futures, which will never actually turn out the way we imagine or fear it. And even if we're here, we're on a mobile, like doom scrolling to see things that we have no control over. And like our mind feels very rational and logical, but we know it is under the influence of tons of cognitive biases. And actually our thinking is quite demented at times. So mindfulness short circuits all of this energy. It just short circuits the momentum of this habitual pull, and it brings us into this moment with openness, with curiosity, with kindness, and then we train our brains to focus. So then we train our brains to know when it's appropriate to focus and when it's okay to let go. And the result of that is that we end up having much more clarity in our thinking. So we don't need to believe everything we think. Our thoughts are very real, but not necessarily true. So we notice our thinking, and then we choose how we want to engage with it. So mindfulness is a source of happiness and freedom for us.
Interesting. So there's a number of things I want to ask you, but the first one is, what's the difference then between mindfulness, as you've just described it, and meditation?
Oh, that is a fine question. So I think that it's like, that every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. That mindfulness is meditation. So we can do anything mindfully in a meditative manner, like chopping the vegetables or cleaning or anything. But some meditations, for example, transcendental meditation, might seek to take us beyond or to transcend like this moment of our existence.
Okay.
And in mindfulness, we're kind of doing exactly the opposite.
Opposite.
We want to come in more fully, in more HD, to sense our experience than ever before. So it brings us right in. So it's a type of meditation.
Right. So what I read and learned and what I practice every morning is 5 minutes of trying just to concentrate on my breath going in and out and focus just on, and that is difficult. And then I have a mantra. If I lose that focus, I have a mantra which gets me back onto it. So is that combining the two, or the best of both worlds?
That is absolute mindfulness. Yeah, that we often begin with our body because our mind is the best time traveler in the whole world, but our body always shows up here in this moment. So and our breath, we're always on an out breath or an in breath. And if we're not, we've bigger things to worry about, right?
That's right.
So it's a great place to start. If your breath is comfortable, it's a great anchor. And we teach ourselves to just draw ourselves home to our body. So sometimes that's, wiggling our toes or sensing what we can hear, just sensing the soundscape. But our breath is great because it's like being along a shoreline and letting waves come in. There's this constant in and out. So we can really rest in our breath. So that is perfect mindfulness.
Great. Oh, thank you for that.
Yes. So you have an emphasis on creating happier communities rather than individuals. Why do you necessarily focus on groups of people?
Yeah, and this is something I'm very passionate about. And I think often we come to mindfulness or anything that, will help us. We start exercising or learning to meditate because we're in pain, right? So it tends to come from a very personal perspective. But what will make it sustainable is if we can do it in a community. So at some point, our personal practice becomes a community practice that you realize I'm practicing not just as a gift for me, but my whole family benefits. Like I know people whose children go, why don't you go and do some deep relaxation, Dad? Because they know like their father is a fundamentally different person and he can offer his fresh presence to them when he's taken time to take care of himself. So by learning to practice in a community, we kind of create this consensus support together. And it also means that we can create the kind of community that we want together. So for me, I work with a lot of people, and a lot of people come in at a point of pain and mindfulness helps. But then when their life gets okay again, they kind of throw it away again because what's the point? So it's really community that makes it long-term sustainable and, societal changing over time, I believe.
Very good. Okay. So then you work with teens and children a lot. So does mindfulness practice differently there than with adults?
Yeah, I feel it's like the same space. We just enter into it by different doors. Like if you're in a hall that might have like 8 or 12 different entry points, that sometimes the words or the language is a little different. With children, we do an awful lot of art. So we do a lot of creative practices. And kind of with children and adults, we also sing songs as part of it because singing can really embody us. But with teenagers, then there's that kind of not quite one or the other, that I'm much more careful about generating a sense of playfulness in case that might be perceived as childishness, so there's a different space.
Okay.
So with teens, we practice much more, I feel it's kind of like I practice much more adjacent. So with a child or an adult, it's eye to eye. And with a teen, it's kind of like, I'm going to leave this here And if this is of use to you, you don't have to say much back to me. So I have a much different kind of feedback loop with teens, give people
Right.
much more space. And we work a lot with teens. I work a lot on character strengths as well. So character strengths and mindfulness. So they do a survey at the beginning to map out their character strengths, and they get their 3 top signature strengths, and that's just where we start. So we don't start with the pain, we don't start with panic attacks, not being able to sleep, feeling like a loser, whatever else the suffering is. We start with the fact that, wow, their number 1 strength is love, their second is creativity, their third is appreciation of beauty and excellence. Like, what a great place to start.
Okay, very good.
Goodness. So you encourage parents to learn mindfulness alongside their children. How does that work?
I really do. So I maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, I started a community mindfulness group based in Dublin, and I've started maybe 4 different community groups, some online and some in person. And the children's one it's mindfulness for children, and it's called Sunnis, which is the Irish word for happiness. But the idea is that a child has to bring a grown-up in their life. So they just have to bring some grown-up. So like 2 friends can come and they just need 1 adult to come with them. And I see that sometimes parents come and they're like, can I just give you my child? And will you promise to never, like, will you hand me back a child who will never have a temper tantrum ever, ever, ever again? And I go, no, actually, no. You're going to come in and sit with us. And when we draw, you're going to draw. And when we sing, you're going to sing. And when we take care of our hearts, you'll take care of your heart. And it is profoundly influential for a child to see their key grown-ups learning how to take care of suffering, how to notice what they're feeling, and how to deliberately nourish their happiness and their well-being. It's so influential. So these are really like, it has transformed families. Yeah, it's wonderful. So I really encourage people to practice together, and sometimes 3 generations are with us, which is so lovely that everyone gets to explore this kind of kind-hearted, wise approach to ourselves together.
If I just picking up on something there, when you mentioned 3 generations, is that 3 generational contact something we've lost in the 20th and 21st century compared to 100, 200, 300 years ago?
Yeah, we've cut ourselves off a lot by creating these siloed spaces. This is a space for children. This is a space for people over 60. You know, and we all have our own innate wisdom. So whether I'm 4 years old or 40 or 80, I have my experience, which is true for me. I have my thoughts about that, and I have wisdom to put into the circle, right? And like, one of the most touching things is when you have those like 2 generations or 3, and they have these light bulb moments. Like, I was with one session that we were working on our fear. It was Halloween, so we all I cut out little ghost shapes, and everyone thought about what scares us, and we write it on the little tummies, and we bring all our fears into the light. And one child was really hard on themselves. They're like, I'm afraid of this, and so stupid. And we really practiced that every fear belongs. And they were stuck in judgment. They were like, that's just, I'm too old now. Like, I'm 7. Like, what am I doing? I'm afraid of that.
Yeah.
And one of their parents said, when I was your age, I was afraid of exactly the same thing. And they were like, they'd completely forgotten that they were ever afraid of, the dark or a monster. And they said, I was afraid of exactly the same thing. And you could see it just melted something between the 2 of them, because the parent was trying to get the child to not be afraid. That was their go-to. Like, they were like, I don't want you to suffer, so just get over it, using anything that I can think of. And actually, when they just listened to the child, they accepted it, and they had this insight, and then magic happened.
Oh, very good. Lovely. So something on your website, you've got the Calm Cafe. Well, tell our audience about that.
Well, that is inspired by how many breaks we take that are not refreshing for us. Like, how many times we're in the middle of a busy day and we maybe have 20 minutes or 30 or maybe a whole hour. And, we arrive back at our desk not refreshed, because we've been scrolling, we've been hooked, we just did some shopping, we huffed a sandwich while we were doing something else. And actually, if we can make good use of our breaks, we can refresh our energy, and we can still feel buoyant at the end of the working day. Many of us give like 120%, and then we are completely depleted and we kind of crawl into the evening with very little to give to our loved ones. So with the Calm Cafe, you know, we don't need anything extra. We don't need a month in Bali. We don't need a meditation cushion. No accoutrements required. So these are short, like 5 to 15 minute practices to help us establish our presence, learn to let go, learn to strengthen our ability to take care of ourselves. And to, you know, it's very much based on positive neuroplasticity. So on creating a habit of well-being, noticing the wholesome qualities that are here. And someone wrote to me a few weeks ago about it, and they'd had a positive COVID diagnosis. And they said, I've just finished the Calm Cafe. And they were like, I joined up because I got this diagnosis, and I knew they were asymptomatic, so they were very lucky. But they said they knew that they would be 2 weeks in a small enclosed space on their own, with all the imaginary thinking that they could do about who they'd been in contact with, waiting for other test results to come back. And they said they knew that they would be a basket case by the end of it. So they did this course every single morning. It's how they started their day. They just practiced every single day. And they said, actually, it's been a wonderful 2 weeks for me. I had this time to take care of myself and nourish myself and listen. And, you know, that was great. If I can do the Calm Cafe during COVID, it's accessible to anyone.
That's right. Oh, very good. Yeah.
Well, could you give us an example of what that might look like for somebody out there listening that may be going through terrible anxiety right now? Is there perhaps some tips that you can give that person right now that may be able to calm them down and bring them down?
Yeah, so there's with anxiety, it's a habit. It's an energetic habit that we have. And the writer Jodi Picoult describes it as being kind of like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but you don't really get anywhere. So we have this habit of like stewing or ruminating over our thoughts, and then we can imagine worse and worse scenarios. So then it keeps building. So what we want to do is interrupt it. We want to short circuit that. And it can be, there's loads of different ways we can, you know, sometimes we have a rubber band and we just snap it. You want like a sharp, like a real twang little shock. And it just shocks your nervous system a tiny bit. Another thing you can do is subtraction. So, you know, start at 200 and keep subtracting in terms of like 13. So 200 minus 13 is, it takes you a second.
187.
187 minus 13 is. And actually, when you do that for a few times, your brain can't do both at the same time. It can't subtract odd numbers and stay anxious at the same time. Oh, so there are just different ways in. So one thing we do is called starfish, where, you know, with children, we talk about starfish a lot. And then we do this, where you just wait for your in-breath to start. And just as my in-breath becomes an out-breath, I need to be in a very specific point. I need to be right at the tip of my thumb. And then I follow my out-breath down. And we continue up and down. And because every finger is a different length, so there's no messing with your breath gets to be completely natural. And you're simply mapping it on fingers. And because everything's a different length, your brain has loads of stuff to kind of compute as to go, I need to be halfway up by now. I need to be up there by the end. Here I go. And you do one hand, check in at your wrist to go, how does it feel in this moment to be me? And maybe anxiety was 9 before and it's 8.9 now. Fine. Flip hands, do another starfish, and just wait for your in-breath. And then do another, and then just check in again. And it tends to like have this very soothing effect on the nervous system. So if you have a chance to do like 2, 4, 6 starfish, that's great. And even just focusing on your out breath is great, like a big sigh out, you know, to take an exaggerated breath in. So aim it below your belly button, like a, and then. So when we breathe out is when our nervous system knows that it's okay to rest. So when we pay that much attention to our out breath, we're human animals, and the human animal in us knows I'm actually safe in this moment if they're breathing out this much.
Right. Yes.
Because we don't breathe out that much when we're ready to fight, flight, freeze.
Yep.
Like nobody cares about breathing out.
No.
So there are many different kind of quick ways in. And what we do is we try and practice them. Like if anxiety is a scale of 1 to 10, we try and do it to learn it when we're like 0, 1, 2, 3. So we learn when we're feeling fairly okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we notice, oh my goodness, I'm at a 7, then we have that kind of muscle memory. Really is like a brain training.
Mm-hmm.
And we trust it because our nervous system knows this. I know now what's going on. This is the moment where I get to rest. So an average emotion takes about 90 seconds to flush through us.
Does it?
And when I learned that, I'd been annoyed at someone for like 3 days. I was very sad to learn that. It's like, what a waste of time. So if we don't feed the emotion, it flushes through our nervous system in about 90 seconds on average.
Right.
And so the point is we get a little feeling of anxiety and we are in the habit of feeding it. We go, oh, anxious thought. Let me build on that a little bit. Bring in my imagination, bring in past anxious moments. I can make a big maelstrom out of this. And suddenly I'm in a panic attack. So we need to learn how to kind of surf when we need to learn how to notice the emotions when we're feeling it. So this is what metacognition really comes in, which is why so many leaders are learning mindfulness now, to know what we're feeling as we're feeling it in that moment. So if we notice like baby anxiety, like how much easier to be able to take care of it when it's at 1, 2, 3, rather than being sideswiped by an anxiety tsunami of 9.
I want to jump in really quick because that makes absolute sense, because I've experienced, for instance, reading an email that's really irritated me. So now it's not anxiety as much as irritation and even anger. And then the phone will go, or Kathleen will call me on Zoom and say, we need to talk. And that is just enough that I forget all about that irritation or anger from the email, and generally don't go. I may go back to it, but generally next time I look at it, I think, it's not worth worrying about. So yeah. Interesting. Very interesting.
And it's kind of like playlists, you know, that one song comes on that evokes, or maybe, you know, evokes an angry or anxious state. But we as humans have a whole nuanced playlist to keep that going. And what we need to do is choose a different playlist and just start fresh somewhere else.
You're right. Back to you, Kathleen.
Well, can you tell our listeners a little bit about the Winterlight Journey?
Oh, yes. So Winterlight is a 12-week program that I do, and it brings us through the winter darkness when so many of us suffer, even in non-pandemic years, through to the first light of spring. Right. And it comes from kind of an old Irish understanding of the new year, that our old new year began on Halloween. So the original New Year in Ireland was celebrated between Halloween and dusk on the 1st of November. And that's an understanding of kind of the newness of a year begins when we pay attention to the seeds that we want to grow in the year ahead. So actually at this time where there's such desolation in the landscape, like it can be very bleak and bare, it can look kind of empty, that actually the seeds deep down in the soil are gathering their nourishment. So that is the time where we need to pay attention to what do we want to grow in the year ahead. So Winterlight, it's done in 3 parts, that we befriend the darkness. So we allow it to be dark. We allow ourselves to draw in and listen to our heart and listen to what we want to grow, like what we're called on to kind of evoke or manifest. And then the 3rd phase is growing towards the light. And it's done with a bunch of poetry and journaling and different kind of creative prompts. And I very much enjoy it.
Very good. That is good. That's good. Then, now I think Kathleen's got the book. You wanted to ask something about the book.
Well, you are an ordained member of the Thich Nhat Hanh Order of Interbeing. Can you just explain what that is, and hopefully
what a great book. My pleasure. Yes, so I've been a student of Thich Nhat Hanh for over 20 years. He introduced the word mindfulness into the English language. He's a very influential and kind of like, you know, a very like kind of subdued, like not the flashiest piece of information that you know about mindfulness. He lives a very simple life. He's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. Martin Luther King nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize in the 1960s. He's this huge, his emphasis is very much on engaged practice. So of, you know, getting off your cushion into the village that has just been bombed to see if you can help people. And he founded the Order of Interbeing. So interbeing is our understanding, kind of like Ubuntu, our understanding that we are interconnected, that are, you know, that we are fundamentally interwoven and existing, kind of that my happiness is your happiness, vice versa. And so he ordained 6 people. It's, you know, he's very much a radical, creative thinker in terms of modern day Buddhist practice. So he ordained 6 people in the 1960s, 3 women and 3 men, which was itself, you know, cutting edge.
Yeah.
And the focus of the Order of Interbeing is about how to find appropriate ways to help people in this moment take care of their suffering and nourish their happiness so that they can be happy. So, you know, that looks very differently across different countries. It looks very different whether there's a war or whether, you know, we have different habit sufferings. So like North America versus Aleppo would have very different practice depending on what suffering we need to take care of and what we can do to make us happy. And like one of the original members of the Order of Interbeing immolated herself. So she was one of the people during the Vietnam War who literally set herself on fire to make a beacon of her body to try and raise awareness for peace.
Wow.
And nowadays we mostly just organize events and try and help people. So it tends to be not that drastic. But it is, yes, it's a worldwide order of volunteers, and we seek to just support communities. So for example, this summertime during the pandemic, there was a group of people in Turkey who wanted to learn how to practice, and they had no one to support them. So as an OI member, people would come and they want to practice in Turkish. So we need someone to do line by line, speak English, speak Turkish, speak English, speak Turkish. And so we created online spaces through the summer to learn to practice together. So I, you know, came to understand a little more about Turkish culture and what their habitual suffering is, so that we can take care of that, and then how to create this community together to nourish each other.
Very good. We're getting towards the end of our time, so we don't want to miss the opportunity. This has been really fascinating. How can people contact you if they want to find out more?
Sure. So my website is orlaosullivan.com, and I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Charlie, what are you on Twitter? That's an easy one to find you on.
Twitter is just Orla. So it's Orla spelled ORLAITH. I was clearly an early adopter on Twitter.
And uppercase, lowercase?
All lowercase, I think, on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Twitter's case sensitive, I know.
I did not know that.
Oh, very much so.
Uppercase.
I'll find it. Either if I search, we'll find you. Okay, so we will put those on there so people can contact you. And there's a last question. We've got a few seconds to ask you. How can mindfulness improve businesses or make businesses better places? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. You know, one of the really good things about the last 20 years is the sheer amount of academic research, which I think just reassures people that it works, even though it's, you know, every culture has this going back thousands of years. So we know we have on average an 8-second attention span. We're multitasking constantly and throwing away our energy. We're filled with cognitive biases, and mindfulness creates a space of clarity and ease. It increases our energy, it boosts problem solving, boost creativity, our immune system. So physically, our immune systems become stronger. It's good for our heart. So our heart actually has a better cardiovascular profile. Our experience of chronic pain goes down. Depression, loneliness, isolation, all of those go down. I would think, why would any sane leader not want to do mindfulness?
Right. Right. No, that's a good explanation. Orla, thank you very much. Back to you, Kathleen.
Well, Orla, my goodness, what an honor it has been. A true pleasure to have you on our show today. And I know that our audience will have learned quite a bit from you. And I will put into practice some of the tips that you mentioned on today's show. So thank you so much for joining us again.
Aw,
Thanks,
dear,
Orla.
Yes.
thank you
And
both so much. It was such a pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us and for tuning into our show. Again, we so appreciate you and we love reading your comments. So do please keep them coming. And again, if anyone out there is interested in becoming a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. So until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.